Sometimes, it's not the shouting that leaves a scar. It's the silence, that moment when your body hits the wall and the room chooses not to move. When a badge weighs more than a name, and dignity is something you have to hold tight in a place designed to strip it away. She didn't say a word. Not when they grabbed her. Not when they shoved her. Not even when her face hit cold tile. Because this story wasn't new to her. It had happened before, not always with force, but always with judgment. And this time, she didn't come to fight. She came to see. But what no one expected, not the deputy, not the judge, not the people who looked away, was who she really was, and why she had finally returned. So the question isn't what happened in that hallway. The real question is, what broke open when she didn't stay quiet? They said it was just a routine morning. That's what the clerks would later repeat when asked. That the crowd wasn't unusual. That the tension wasn't any different than any other Monday. That the hallway always felt cold because of the tiles, not because of the silence. But something in the air had shifted subtle, unspoken, like a draft through an old church right before the glass cracks. The woman stood alone near courtroom 3B. Gray blouse, black slacks, no jewelry, no phone in hand, not recording, not talking, just present. Still, her name was Evelyn Mercer, though no one in that hallway knew it yet. To Deputy Colton Reeves, she was just another face he didn't recognize, and in his eyes, that was reason enough to escalate. He didn't ask why she was there, didn't offer a greeting, just saw her skin, her silence, and something inside him snapped to attention. He barked. She didn't flinch, didn't reach, didn't speak, just lifted her eyes and looked at him measured, deliberate, not defiant, not submissive, a kind of silence that didn't beg for mercy or permission, the kind that unnerved men like him. Reeves stepped forward, close enough to smell the starch of her blouse. Without waiting, he yanked her bag from her shoulder. With the other hand, he twisted her wrist, fast, jerking her body toward the cold courthouse wall. Her shoulder hit first, then her cheekbone. The cuffs clinked like gavel cracks. And just like that, she became the moment. Gasps. Then, silence. Phones came up, screens lit red. But no one moved. No one stopped it. A public defender glanced, then turned. A janitor kept mopping. A bailiff stood 10 feet away and checked the time. The system didn't blink. It adjusted. And Evelyn? She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She simply turned her face slowly until her eyes met his again. No words. Just that look. Not rage. Not fear. It was knowing. Like she'd been here before. Maybe too many times. Like she already knew how this would end. Deputy Reeves stood over her, chest heaving. His jaw clenched tight, but his left hand trembled slightly. He didn't notice. But Evelyn did. So did the camera light blinking red. Somewhere, someone was still filming. A quiet active witness. That morning, justice wasn't blind. It was looking the other way. But Evelyn Mercer wasn't. She wasn't supposed to be noticed. Not yet. And yet now every eye watched her as Reeves unhooked the cuffs, dropped them into his belt, and walked away like nothing had happened. She didn't follow. Didn't file a complaint. She sat back down. One of the clerks stared at her for a second too long, as if trying to figure out if he should say something. Then he didn't, like everyone else. But her silence felt different. This wasn't the silence of someone broken. This was the silence of intention. Outside, the sky was still gray. Not rain, just that kind of cold Midwest heaviness that never really left you in February. The courthouse building stood like a monument to order stone and glass and rules carved into brass plaques. But inside, the floors were warped from years of boots, the air reeked of over-polished leather, and the walls whispered with stories no one ever really told. Evelyn's story started here. Or maybe It returned here. 17 years ago, she had stood in this same hallway, same stone, same sharp corners. Only that time, she was the one holding a hand, her mother's, a woman who wore her dignity like a second skin event when it got her nothing. They had taken 2 buses from East St. Louis. She was just a girl then, dressed for church white blouse, a skirt her mother had ironed that morning. But the officer at the door had stared at them with eyes that said more than words ever could. You can't come in here dressed like that. No policy, no explanation, just judgment. They'd turned around, both silent, both knowing. Her mother had squeezed her hand, not out of reassurance, but out of anger too deep for words. That was the day Evelyn learned something. That silence wasn't absence, it was weight. And sometimes the only way to carry that weight was to bury it under more silence. Now, decades later, Evelyn sat again in the same building, same silence. But this time, something was different. The mark on her cheekbone throbbed under the courthouse fluorescence. She didn't touch it, didn't wince. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a worn piece of paper, folded 4 times, yellowed edges, ink nearly faded. Her mother's handwriting. Justice doesn't wear a badge. It walks in your spine. If you feel it there, don't let anyone break it. She read it twice, then folded it again and slid it back behind her Department of Justice ID. No one in that hallway knew who she was. But they would. Not because she raised her voice, but because she didn't have to. Deputy Colton Reeves, meanwhile, returned to his post like a soldier returning from war. Not a man who just assaulted someone. Just another Monday, another non-compliant. He didn't log it, didn't report it, didn't ask who she was, because he thought she didn't matter. Because for years, people like him got away with acting first and apologizing never. He stood tall, folding his arms across his chest, scanning the hallway again, watching, waiting, ready. But something had shifted. And this time, someone had noticed. A bailiff glanced at her, then at him. A paralegal typed slower than before, pretending not to watch. The hallway didn't echo with noise. It echoed with tension. And Evelyn? She waited. Not for an apology. Not for a headline. She waited because that was part of the plan. And she had waited long enough. She had come to this courthouse not as a visitor, not as a protester, not even as an enforcer. She came as a test, to see if this system was still as blind as it had been when she was 17, to see if justice still meant silence. And what she saw confirmed everything she feared and everything she had prepared for. Her silence was not passive. It was gathering. And soon it would speak louder than any badge ever could. The hallway had returned to its usual rhythm. The buzz of fluorescent lights. The rhythmic tap of boots on tile. The clerks clacking on keyboards as if nothing had happened. But Evelyn Mercer hadn't moved. She sat on the same wooden bench, back straight, hands folded over her lap, the cuff mark still red around her wrist. Her face remained calm, but not detached focused, intentional. There was a quiet storm in her stillness, but no one knew the forecast yet. Across from her, a teenage girl whispered to her public defender. She kept glancing at Evelyn, uncertain whether to speak or stay in the safe comfort of not getting involved. She chose silence. They almost always did. Silence. It had followed Evelyn her whole life. Not the kind you seek, the kind you survive. The silence of being told you're too much. The silence of knowing a yes can be snatched away without explanation. The silence after you report misconduct and no one ever calls back. She remembered every one of them. Like the silence that came after she submitted her first FBI application, 4 months after graduating summa cum laude from Howard. She passed every exam, outran every obstacle course, outscored most of her peers. But when she submitted a complaint against a senior instructor who referred to a black cadet as Jungle Fast, the call never came. Just a letter. 2 sentences. We regret to inform you. Your application is no longer under consideration. No reason. No next step. Just silence. She almost gave up then. Almost. But then her mother's health declined stage 3 breast cancer and Evelyn moved back home to help. In one of those heavy 2 a.m. cleaning sessions where the body moves to distract the soul, she found it. A folded paper tucked inside her mother's Bible. The same letter she now carried in her wallet. Justice doesn't wear a badge. It walks in your spine. If you feel it there, don't let anyone break it. She hadn't shown it to the second review board. She hadn't quoted it in any hearings. But she memorized it, line by line, because it reminded her that even if no one else saw her worth, she could not afford to forget it herself. Now she sat once again in a courthouse that didn't want to remember her. Not the 17-year-old version of her, who had been turned away because her mother's skirt was too casual. Not the 26-year-old version, who was labeled hostile for suggesting that bail policies were racially biased. Not the 34-year-old version, who was told that her complaint against a judge's behavior was poorly timed. They didn't want her silence broken. They wanted her gone. Or still. But Evelyn Mercer had learned something in those empty years between her mother's funeral and her DOJ promotion. Stillness is not surrender. And silence is not consent. Across the hallway, Deputy Reeves leaned against the wall again, arms crossed, doing his best impression of dominance. He hadn't looked at Evelyn since the incident. Didn't ask her name. Didn't write a report. Didn't think he needed to. Because men like him weren't trained to reflect. They were trained to survive scrutiny by pretending it doesn't exist. And most days, that worked. Until it didn't. In the break room 3 floors up, 2 junior officers watched the clip on mute. A shaky phone video. The sound removed, but the image clear. A woman being cuffed. Not resisting. Not yelling. Just still. And then that look. Officer Melanie Cruz leaned back in her chair. "Who is she?" she asked. Her partner shook his head. "Doesn't say. No caption. Just the video. No one's ID'd her yet." Melanie watched the woman's eyes in the freeze frame. "That's not someone you put in cuffs," she whispered. "That's someone who puts people in hearings." Back on the bench, Evelyn finally blinked. A soft motion. Slow. Deliberate. Not fatigue release. She had felt the weight of silence pressing against her chest all morning. But now, it was pressing against the building. She could feel it. The tension. The quiet. Not the kind that soothes, but the kind before something erupts. She glanced at her watch. 10:11 a.m. A hearing was about to begin in courtroom 3B. The door opened. A man in a suit stepped out, glanced around, and his eyes landed on Evelyn. Recognition flickered just for a moment. Then it vanished behind a lawyer's practiced expression. He turned and walked away. But Evelyn didn't miss it. She stood, not fast, not theatrical, just with certainty. She adjusted her sleeve, picked up her bag, and walked past Deputy Reeves, past the clerk desk, past the people still pretending not to see. She wasn't heading for the courtroom. She was heading for the administrative wing. Behind her, the hallway filled again with noise. But no one called her name. No one stopped her. Because deep down, even if they didn't know her name, they knew she wasn't here by accident. In the elevator, she opened her phone. A single message blinked. From Tessa Sykes. Subject: Jamari. Reeves was the one. The clip's live. She closed her eyes. It was happening. The past wasn't sleeping anymore. It was screaming in silence. She thought of that little boy again, Jamari's arm twisted, the sound of bones breaking, the way his mother begged for someone to listen. They never did. Until now. And that silence was no longer safe. The hallway had no name. Just a frosted glass door with fading letters. Internal review. Judicial Liaison Unit. Evelyn knocked once, then let herself in. The room was sterile. A table, a computer, 3 gray chairs, fluorescent lights that buzzed a little louder than necessary. Behind the desk sat Mara Helms, court compliance officer. Late 40s, sharp blazer, and an expression that had learned to outweigh discomfort. She looked up, blinked. "Ma'am, can I help ye?" Evelyn set her ID down. A gold badge. Federal Deputy Director, Civil Rights Division, U.S. Department of Justice. The air in the room shifted like a string had snapped. Mara straightened, cleared her throat. I didn't realize." "You weren't supposed to," Evelyn said quietly. She opened her satchel and removed a folder, thick, marked with a red tab. Mara's hands trembled just slightly when she reached for it. Inside, a compilation of complaints. 2 body cam stills with timestamps misaligned by 6 seconds. Eyewitness affidavits that had never reached internal affairs. One statement, signed by a name she hadn't heard in years. Tessa Sykes. Elsewhere in a kitchen 45 minutes north, a laptop sat open. On screen, a paused video. Grainy, slanted, but unmistakable. A teenage boy, maybe 14, standing by the courthouse lawn, comic book in hand. Officer Reeves's voice, off camera. "Let's move now." Then the shove, the snap, the scream, and the silence that followed. Tessa Sykes had posted it to her personal page at 8:57 a.m. No caption, just a timestamp. Jamari Sykes, 7 years ago. Back in the review office, Evelyn leaned forward. "Do you remember the name Jamari Sykes?" Mara frowned. I think there was an incident." "There was a cover-up," Evelyn said. Her tone wasn't harsh, just undeniable. She opened another folder. The body cam footage never made it into the system. The report was signed off with no medical documentation. The arrest was thrown out. But the injury remained. His arm still doesn't straighten fully. Mara's voice was quieter now. "That's deeply unfortunate." Evelyn didn't blink. Unfortunate isn't the word you're looking for. By noon, the video had crossed county lines. It landed on activist pages, civil rights feeds, and eventually national outlets. People didn't just share it, they remembered it. Because everyone had seen one like it before. But this time, the boy had a name. The officer had a face. And the silence had a history. 11:07 a.m. Evelyn called a meeting. Not public, not dramatic. A conference room on the second floor. No windows, 2 chairs, 1 camera recording. She didn't sit. When Reeves walked in, his eyes narrowed, jaw locked. He didn't ask why he was there, because he thought he already knew. She slid the first document toward him. "You want to explain this timeline?" He glanced, shrugged. "Old case. Dismissed." Evelyn didn't move. "Try again." Reeves laughed. "What, you think I broke the kid's arm for fun?" Her voice dropped. "I think you never thought anyone would look back." She played the clip. Not the new one. The old one edited, sanitized, filed 7 years ago. Then she played the full version. From the original body cam, recovered from cloud storage. Different angle. Unredacted. The shove. The impact. The moment Reeves whispered, "That'll teach him." He froze. Just for a second. But Evelyn caught it. "You told the rookie that day. Handle the loud ones early." Reeves' voice cracked. "You don't understand what it's like out there." Evelyn's eyes hardened. "I do. More than you ever will." She paused. Let the silence spread. "When I was Jamari's age, I watched my mother get turned away at this same door. Not for what she did, for who she was. We took 2 buses. She wore her best blouse. And they told her she didn't belong." Her voice didn't rise. But Reeves leaned back, like her words carried a weight he couldn't lift. "I remember how small she looked. Not because she was weak, but because she had to shrink herself to survive." She stepped closer. And now you've spent a decade building your career on fear. He scoffed. What do you want, huh? A confession? She shook her head slowly. No. She held up a flash drive. I want your silence. 3 p.m. The DOJ issued a statement. Discreet, precise. We are aware of the Franklin County video circulating online. An internal review is underway. But the internet didn't wait. Justice for Jamari. Stand with Tessa. Who eyes Evelyn? The hashtags trended before the press could catch up. By mid-afternoon, the weight of Evelyn's presence was being felt everywhere. Not because she shouted, but because people finally listened. In the courthouse cafeteria, 2 junior officers sat silent over lunch. One finally whispered, "She was just standing there. That's all." The other nodded, almost ashamed. "We let it happen." Back in the hallway where it all began, someone posted a sign above the bench where Evelyn had been cuffed. Just a piece of paper. No signature. This is where justice flinched. But she didn't. That evening, Evelyn sat alone in her hotel room, curtains drawn, a lamp dimmed to golden glow. She hadn't turned on the news. She didn't need to. Her laptop chimed. Another email from Tessa. People are coming forward. A woman who filed a complaint in 18. A guy from Reeves Academy class. We're not alone. Evelyn read it, then closed her eyes. There were no victory bells, no applause. But in that quiet, for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone in the fight. The morning after the video went viral, the precinct felt still. Not quiet, still, like the air was holding its breath, like the walls had heard something they could never unhear. Deputy Reeves entered through the rear door, coffee in hand, same jacket, same badge. But something had changed. No nods. No, "Hey Reeves." No shared smirks from officers who once called him old school. A young cadet looked up from his locker, met Reeves's eyes for a second, then quickly turned and zipped his jacket higher, covering the logo stitched above his heart. Federal Police Training Corps. That small movement cut deeper than discipline. It was detachment. In the admin wing, Evelyn stood before a long table of senior officers. No podium, no title cards, just coffee, papers, and a silence that now listened when she spoke. She didn't open with discipline. She opened with memory. "We've lost people," she said softly, "not just to resignations, but to silence, to cultures we refuse to question. And this morning, we begin differently." She nodded toward the door. And Marion Fields walked in. The room shifted. Some eyebrows raised, a few mouths tightened. Others looked at their notes as if unsure what to say. Marion hadn't been in uniform in 5 years, not since she was demoted, for what the memo called issues with tone and team integration. What it really meant was this. She was a woman who wouldn't back down, and some men weren't ready for that. Now, Marion wore a gray blazer. No badge yet, but presence? That filled the room. Evelyn gestured. Marion Fields returns today as Deputy Director of Training and Cultural Response. She will oversee officer development with an emphasis on ethics, communication, and conflict de-escalation. No one clapped, but no one objected. Marion stepped forward. Her voice didn't need volume. "I wasn't quiet these past few years," she said. "I was sidelined. But I've had time to think, and what I've come to understand is this." She looked around the table. "You don't fix systems by screaming louder. You fix them by listening deeper." She paused, and not to the people in charge, but to the ones too afraid to speak. Later that week, Marion led her first training session. It wasn't about weapons. It wasn't about law. It was about presence. The slide behind her read, "When was the last time someone truly listened to you, not because of your badge, but because of your story?" No one answered right away. Then a rookie lifted his hand, quietly. "My mom," he said. "After my first patrol, I told her I got profiled on the way to the station by another officer. She said, Be careful. You'll be blamed for your own story. Another officer nodded. That happened to my brother. He didn't even file a complaint. Said it wouldn't matter. Marion let the silence stretch. Then broke it gently. You matter. Outside the training room, Evelyn stood behind the observation window, watching. She didn't smile. But something in her chest shifted like a wall had finally given way. She turned, walked back to her office. On her desk, a small box. Inside it, Reeves's badge, gun, and exit form. He hadn't shown up for the exit interview. He didn't need to. The room had already answered. That night, Evelyn returned to her hotel late. The hallway was empty. Her shoes echoed softly against the linoleum. She reached her door but didn't go in. Instead, she sat on the floor, back against the wall, eyes closed. She didn't cry, but she breathed deep, ragged, silent. Not from exhaustion, but from finally exhaling. All the years she carried herself alone. All the promotions she never celebrated. All the birthdays spent studying case files instead of blowing out candles. They had led to this moment. Not victory, but clarity. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Tessa. He's officially off the force. My brother saw the news. He just stared at the screen for a long time. Then he smiled. He said, maybe silence isn't safer. Maybe it's just heavier. Evelyn read it twice, then whispered into the room, just to herself. He's right. The next morning, she entered the precinct through the front entrance. For the first time, no one looked confused. They didn't all greet her, but they saw her. That was enough. She passed by a bulletin board near the entry. Someone had pinned a sheet of paper over the training schedule. Typed in bold, "Justice isn't the loudest voice in the room. It's the one you can hear even after the room is empty." She stopped, folded it gently, placed it in her folder, and walked on. The new training wing didn't feel like a courtroom. There were no oak benches, no marble plaques quoting Latin, no flags standing stiff in silence. Just soft gray walls, windows open to sunlight, and a wide hallway that carried voices instead of silencing them. On the eastern side of the building, a small crowd gathered. No press, no podium, just people. Cadets in pressed uniforms, officers in plain clothes, two janitors still holding brooms who had quietly refused to step away. Evelyn Mercer stood at the center of the hallway, facing a wall where a frame had just been hung. Not a portrait, not an award, just a quote. Behind glass, black letters, handwritten, "Justice does not begin with power. It begins with conscience." E.M. No one clapped. They just read, some more than once, some aloud, under their breath, like a prayer they'd never heard before but somehow already believed in. Deputy Director Marion Field stood beside Evelyn. She didn't speak either. Not yet. But she looked across the room, found a face she hadn't seen in years. Leticia Roy, a former training officer who'd been forced into early retirement after refusing to falsify an incident report involving an undocumented teen. Today, she was back. Not in uniform, but in presence. Evelyn had invited her, quietly, privately, because not all names belong on plaques. Some belong in rooms, in chairs, at tables that once locked them out. Later that day, Leticia would say something to a new class of cadets. Not about courage, but about continuity. They told me once that legacy is built by those who lead from the front. But I think it's built by those who walk beside others, even when no one sees them. One cadet wrote it down. Another whispered it into their recorder. A third just nodded and never forgot. Meanwhile, Reeves packed the last of his things into a government-issued cardboard box. He didn't look angry. He didn't look vindicated. He looked hollow, not because of the exit, but because he now understood. He had never actually been the center of anything. He had moved through rooms people pretended to respect only because they feared him. Now, with the fear gone, there was nothing left. No hallway cleared for his walkout. No friend to slap his back. No hand to offer help with the door. Only silence. But not the kind Evelyn once carried. This was the kind that closed behind you. When Reeves walked past the new training wing on his way out, he paused at the frame. He read the quote twice, then lowered his eyes and kept walking. No one followed. Back upstairs, Evelyn sat in her office, alone. Not lonely present. The door was open. Not wide, but open. She took out her pen and opened the personnel logbook. The same one that once omitted names like Leticia's. The same one that buried quiet resignations under blank lines. She flipped to a clean page, wrote a name. Not Reeves, but Cadet James Linwood, referred by Marion Fields, background in community mediation, fluent in Spanish and ASL. And beneath it, she added a note. Soft, spoken, but steady. She paused, then underlined steady. Outside, in the main lobby, a mother stood beside her teenage son. They had come for a tour. The boy wore a blazer too big for his shoulders and sneakers too clean for the scuffed floor. He looked around, overwhelmed. His mother nudged him forward gently. Then he saw it. The wall, the frame. He read it aloud. Just a whisper. Justice does not begin with power. It begins with conscience. He didn't know who EM was. Not yet. But he stood straighter, like the wall had spoken directly to him. Down the corridor, Marion paused beside Evelyn's open door. You ready? Evelyn looked up. I am not sure ready is ever the word. Marion smiled. Maybe not, but necessary. Evelyn closed the logbook, stood, picked up her coat, her folder, her presents. Together, they walked out two women once told to be quieter, smaller, softer. They walked without a microphone, without press, without applause, but with intention. As they reached the front steps, a young officer approached. Nervous, eyes down. Then, Ma'am? Evelyn turned. He cleared his throat. Just wanted to say, I saw the clip. I wasn't there. But I wish I had been. I wish I had done something. Evelyn studied him, then offered just 3 words. Now you can. He nodded, and something in him shifted. Not resolved, but activated. The next morning, the sun rose over Franklin County. No headlines. No parades. Just a slow, quiet return to purpose. A janitor buffed the floor near courtroom 3B, humming softly. A clerk reset the docket board, and for the first time in a long time, listed Ethics Oversight Review right beneath preliminary hearings. And in the training room, Marion asked again, when was the last time you felt heard? And this time, 5 people raised their hands. Not all to answer. Some just to say, now. Epilogue, 4:13 p.m. A letter arrived at Evelyn's office. No return address. Inside, a folded note. My arm's still crooked, but I draw better with it. They asked who inspired my last piece. I told them someone who never raised her voice, just her eyes. Jamari. Evelyn read it once, then placed it in the drawer beside her mother's letter. 2 pages. 2 generations. Same weight. Same spine. Have you ever walked into a room and felt like you weren't meant to exist there? Like your presence made others uncomfortable before you even said a word? Like your silence was mistaken for weakness when in fact, it was the loudest part of you? Evelyn Mercer didn't raise her voice. She didn't seek revenge. She simply refused to disappear. And through her quiet presence, she reminded us that dignity isn't about demanding space, it's about defining it. If you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or erased. Know this: you are not alone. Your story matters, and your presence, even in silence, carries weight. Let this story remind us that change doesn't always shout. It often begins in the quiet moments, in the rooms we once thought we'd never be allowed to enter. Have you ever had to carry yourself with grace when no one was watching? I'd love to hear your story. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this episode moved you, share it with someone who might need to hear it too. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the voices, stories, and truths that deserve to be heard. Remember, justice does not begin with power. It begins with conscience. I'll see you in the next story. Stay tuned.